Myself, Kendra, Bridget, and Ashley will be joining a little bit later. We are all occupational therapists, obviously, that work at CST Academy. And this month is OT month. So we thought it'd be the perfect opportunity to chat about one of, I think, the biggest areas that we work on in our session, specifically at CST, and that is sensory processing. Um, okay, so thinking about sensory processing and everything that it is, the processing piece is the body's ability to receive sensory information from the environment. So that's sights and sounds and smells and all of that stuff. And then the ability for our brains to process it and have an appropriate response. We all have different appropriate responses to sensory input, and we all have different preferences too that we'll go into as we continue on through this presentation. Also, when thinking about some of the terminology that you might have heard, obviously sensory processing is one piece of that. And then also we often talk about sensory regulation, which is then the ability to kind of adjust our level of arousal and manage that input that's coming at us in order to function day to day, which we know is a big reason why, we're working with some of our kiddos because the challenges with sensory regulation are impacting their ability to engage in the activities that they love. And then you can kind of see on this pyramid that sensory processing is the foundation of everything that kids are learning and everything that we as adults, we started out kind of on that foundational level, and those needs still need to be met before we work on the things at the top of the pyramid. So, when we're thinking about asking a kiddo to work on teeth brushing or to even just brush their teeth in the morning, but they might be having a really hard time processing, tactile input, that touch input, that can be a really big ask if we haven't met kind of their foundational needs at the bottom of this pyramid, again, before working up to the top. I also think it's important to highlight that like behavior piece at the top. We say all the time that sensory processing, sensory regulation really impacts behavior. It impacts our behavior as adults if we're exposed to something or overwhelmed by something in our sensory world. That impacts our behavior. I might have a really short fuse if I, hear my husband like chewing his food really loud, because for me, that's a sensory, an auditory sensory thing that really bothers me and impacts me. So, we love to look at this pyramid, and I think it's a great visual as to why we want to focus on the sensory piece of things before we move up the pyramid. And then this visual kind of highlights words that you may have heard when your OT is talking about sensory processing, or just in reference to kind of, day-to-day processing. So if you look at kind of the top right quadrant, that's sensory seeking, and you can go around kind of this visual. But sensory seeking individuals have a really high threshold, a high tolerance for input, meaning they need a ton of input for them to register it and for them to feel regulated. And then they have an active response, which means they're constantly seeking it out. Then on the flip side of that, if you look at like sensory avoiding, they are really impacted by small amounts of sensory input, and they are active in avoiding it. So those are our kiddos who will physically avoid the sensory input that's bothering them. They'll withdraw from a situation, that sort of thing. One that's often tricky when we're explaining sensory patterns is sensory low registration, this kind of top left-hand corner. And low registration are people that really require a lot of sensory input to fulfill their sensory needs, but they're also pretty passive at seeking that out. So they're not gonna, their body might need movement, but they're not most likely not going to seek that out. So these are our kiddos that we see that might be kind of, we might say like low arousal. So they might be sitting in their chair. They might be kind of slumped over, appear fatigued. And so we really want to provide like a lot of sensory rich activities to help them feel regulated. So I think it's also important to note when we're thinking about sensory patterns that you might be sensory seeking in one sense and sensory avoiding in another sense, and sensory sensitive in a different sense, which is the fun of sensory processing, is that it's not, you're not usually sensory seeking across the board, or you're not, you don't usually fall into one bucket, and that applies to all of us, especially, if you just think about yourself and your own sensory preferences.
Awesome. So next we're going to go into a little overview of each of the sensory systems, what they are responsible for in our body, and then some activity ideas for home that you might be able to incorporate. So we'll start with the proprioception system. The proprioceptive system is what is responsible for telling us where our body is in space. So the system affects our body awareness, our overall motor coordination, our force exertion and control, as well as our ability to move around and navigate our environment. So some examples of like what Sam was just talking about of someone who might be highly seeking in this system is someone who likes really tight hugs or squeezes, or they like to run in and crash into the couch or lay over the couch at the ends of the couch. And then an example of someone that might be more low arousal in this area is someone who she kind of mentioned is like slumped in their chair. They have lower muscle tone, they have a rounded posture, etc. So some activities that are great for home and that we often do in the clinic include animal walks, yoga poses, anything that involves pushing objects, heavy objects that can include laundry baskets or groceries or carrying their own backpack, crashing and jumping into a bed or a couch, jumping on a trampoline or couch cushions, and then giving really big hugs or arm squeezes. And then wheelbarrow walks are another really great one as well. And then one specific activity that we wanted to highlight is a fun game you can do with just items you have around your house. So all you would need is a laundry basket and literally anything that can fit inside of it. Have your kiddo put the items in and they can push it across the floor. This is a fun way. You can also work on cleanup routines by putting them in the basket and pushing it to where they belong. You can make it kind of an obstacle course and working on following directions by putting it in, pushing it across the floor, and taking it out. So it's a fun activity that not only targets the proprioceptive system, but also promotes cleanup routines and following directions or sequencing as well. The next system we'll talk about is the vestibular system. This system is located actually in our inner ear and gives our body information regarding where our head is in space, the speed and the direction of movement our head is going. This system affects, again, our overall body coordination. The big one for this system also is our balance, and then also the overall muscle tone. Someone who is highly seeking in this system might really, really enjoy jumping up and down on a trampoline or swinging on swings, spinning, those types of things. And someone who has a little bit of a lower registration in this system might have poor balance, bump into things, trip over things, etc. Activities that can target this system at home include walking on a balance beam or stepping stones, which can be DIY through using tape or couch cushions and pillows, swinging, jumping again up and down on a couch or a trampoline, bouncing on a therapy ball, riding a bike or a scooter, and then doing somersaults and log rolls are two other fun activities that target this system as well. One specific thing that goes well with this system is the song Five Little Monkeys. So playing this song and having your kiddo jump up and down on a bed or a trampoline or a couch can be really fun. And then having them crash down onto their bottom when each little monkey falls off the bed targets both the vestibular and the proprioceptive system as well. This also is a great way to work on joint attention through singing together and following directions/steps through understanding that each time you say, and one little monkey fell off the bed, they'll fall into their bottom. It can be really fun. And then there's the auditory system. So this is responsible for our hearing. This system affects our ability to understand sound, interact with others, and our overall communication. Another big thing that the auditory system can affect is our attention. For example, if someone is in a very loud environment and they have trouble focusing on what's their tasks at hand because of the sounds around them, it can really affect our attention as well. Someone who is seeking in the system might really love music and sounds, singing them themselves, watching a very particular part of a YouTube video or a song to get that auditory input that they really, really like. And someone who is avoiding auditory input might cover their ears when they hear loud noises. And things like that. Some strategies you can use at home is giving your child a warning whenever a loud activity is going to happen, like vacuuming. Collaborating with your OT to see if trialing some noise canceling headphones might be beneficial for loud environments, or again, those loud activities at home, like vacuuming. Playing calming music in the background during seated tasks is really great, or incorporating them into like their bedtime routine as well. Encouraging play with louder instruments or noise makers when appropriate, and then using a noise machine at bedtime is another great way to promote a sense of calm and also block out outside noises that might be distracting or too loud. And then one thing that can be incorporated into daily routines is some calming music like Disney classical. So if your kiddo has a really preferred or they love a particular movie, finding the playlist of that movie's classical music can be really nice to incorporate into wind down or calming routines, or to use during transitions between different activities or even locations, like going from home to car or between locations at home as well.
Awesome. The next system we will talk about is the tactile system. And this is the sensory system that is responsible for processing touch. And this system can notify us of pain tolerance, tolerance of different textures, and body awareness. So like Sam said at the beginning, we all process all of our senses at different levels. Some of us seek this input, some of us avoid, some of us are more sensitive. So those, especially with pain tolerance, some of us might feel pain at a higher level. We might be more sensitive to that pain. Some of us may not. And, we may not realize we cut our hand or cut our leg before we look down and see it. If that's that's the tactile system that is responsible for registering the pain that we are getting from whatever incident might have occurred and letting our brain know that, hey, this happened. Tolerance of different textures. So these are our kids who love to play with different textures or may not love it. This is also our kids who may be sensitive to a variety of clothing textures. So they may have a hard time, wearing jeans or wearing, elastic pants or tight shirts. So, or they might be avoidant of it in different ways. So the tactile system is responsible for letting our brain know how our body feels wearing different things. This is also, we also see this with our kids who might be picky eaters. So, if they have a harder time touching these different textures on their hands, they're probably not going to like them in their mouth when they're trying different foods. So we oftentimes see our picky eaters have a harder time with like messy play as well, because they're more sensitive to those textures on their hands as well. And then the last thing is body awareness. So a lot of times, if our clients or if our kids like to, rub against the walls or rub up against other people, they might have a harder time with their body awareness. And it could just be, looking for that input in different ways too, which also loops in the proprioceptive system as well. So different activities we can do to provide input to the tactile system is engaging in sensory bends. These are a great way to engage in different textures on our hands. There's options to do dry sensory bends, such as uncooked pasta, uncooked beans, a variety of different things. And then there's also the wet sensory bins, such as shaving cream, paint, soap and water. The options are endless. There's a lot of really fun things we can do with this. Messy play is also a great thing to do. So playing in shaving cream, playing in slime, playing in finger painting. These are great ways to make it fun and engaging for our kids who might be a little bit more hesitant to try these new textures on their hands. If they are a little bit more hesitant, providing a tool to interact with that substance, whatever you're using, is a great way to ease them in. And something else I like to do is just have a towel next to them, because when they feel like they can remove it, they're a lot more willing to try. So that's a great way to, help them become more comfortable, especially in those earlier stages when they might be a little bit more hesitant. Like I said, water play is another great tactile activity, playing with food. This is a great activity to just become more comfortable with a variety of textures of foods. Some kids are, just scared to try different things or may not have tried things before. So playing with food, painting with food, all sorts of things is a fun way to make it less daunting and a little bit more enjoyable for them. And then the last thing is deep pressure massage. This is a great way to provide our kids with some tactile input as well. So I already spoke on this a little bit, but sensory bends are a great way to interact with different substances. Those can be dry or wet. Typically, our kids who are a little bit more hesitant are more successful with dry sensory bends first, and then we can kind of progress them into those wet sensory bends. So this is a great activity to do at home and can be done in the bathtub, in the shower, in a Tupperware, really whatever you have. This can be done in a lot of different ways. The next system I'm going to talk about is the visual system, and this system is responsible for our sense of sight. This sensory system can affect our balance. So, obviously we need to be able to see where we're going, to be able to balance on whatever surface we are walking on. Depth perception, so especially when we're moving between different surfaces that might be different heights, being able to notice those differences with our vision. And then navigation of environment. So balance and depth perception definitely play a role in this as well, just to be able to navigate our environment safely. Activities we can do to engage the visual system are sensory bottles. So especially ones with like vegetable oil and food dye, there's fun ways to kind of make it, move up and down in different like visually stimulating ways we can make those sensory bottles cool. Bubbles, kaleidoscopes, liquid timers are really fun for kids, especially if they need assistance transitioning between different things. That can be a really nice way to engage their visual system. Glow sticks are fun. Sunglasses when they're outside, especially if they're more sensitive to that light. Replacing fluorescent lights, this is a big one. A lot of times our kids who are more sensitive to light have a really hard time focusing in the classroom and out in their community. It might come through in a variety of different ways, but it could just be that they are really overstimulated and those fluorescent lights might just be tricky for them and too much. So replacing these can be really helpful for our kiddos. And then similarly, a light dimmer, especially if they benefit from, if they're more sensitive, maybe we can work on this light dimmer to kind of help make it more inviting for them. And then an activity we can do to work on the visual system is bubbles. Bubbles are a great way to engage our kiddos and, work on providing them that visual input that they're looking for. It's also a great way to promote different language targets that you might be working on with your kids. So yeah, the opportunities are endless with bubbles. This is a great idea. The olfactory system is next, and this is our sense of smell. And this affects our kids' eating as well. So if they have a preference to particular smells or they do not prefer particular smells, this determines how they interact with their foods. Also, the ability to filter out background odors. So, especially out in their community, in school, this can be a big one. If there are a variety of smells that they might be more sensitive to, this could be distracting and cause dysregulation. And then the ability to discriminate between odors. So discriminate between what different things smell like, if they like it, if they don't. This can be challenging for some people. So, and is all related to that sensory system of smell. Activities we can do to provide input is use scented markers, Play-Doh, scented stickers, including essential oils in our routines. So vanilla and lavender is more calming, peppermint or citrus is more alerting. There's also a variety of more different smells and reasons for use if this is something of interest for you. Flavored lip balm, scented lotions, and then also if your child is avoidant of smells, having those no scent zones to help their regulation. Something that we can do to stimulate their sense of smell is to do bedtime massages. This is really nice to do with lavender lotion just to help relax them before bed and provide them some input to prepare them for that next step in their nighttime routine.
Okay, the next sense is the gustatory system, which is our sense of taste, and it can affect an individual's ability to discriminate between the different flavors, also known as the oral sensory system. So it can also contribute to picky eating if we may be sensitive to certain flavors and tastes. And then some of the activities for this system would be chewing gum, crunching hard foods. These would be particularly useful for individuals that seek out things, like maybe seek out, strong flavors or seek out oral sensory input. And then drinking thick liquids through a straw, using cookie cutters to help make food fun, which is especially important for those picky eaters, trying to find different creative ways for them to interact with their foods. Again, with that, just exploring a variety of foods, making sure at meal times and snack times that there's a different variety available, always keeping those comfort foods out there, but having some different ones as well. So that way the kiddos can explore different tastes and different textures. And then sucking on lemons or oranges, again, for kids that really seek out those more intense flavors, those ones are really great. Sucking on a lollipop is also a good way to get that oral input. And then similar to above, the activity spotlight for this one would be a rainbow snack. So having an array of different foods, all of the same color. It could be your child's favorite color. You can try them together. After you try each one, talking about how they taste and how they feel. And, if we're not ready yet to try the foods, we can at least explore them together and talk about them and play with them in silly ways. And then our final sense is interoception, which is one of the lesser known ones, but this one refers to sensations related to the physiological and physical conditions of the body. So how we process different things, different feelings, and that can be related to pain tolerance. So, maybe an individual has a low tolerance for pain or a high tolerance for pain. That is kind of where interoception plays in relation to that. Feelings of hunger and thirst. So for some individuals, they might realize, oh, my belly's grumbling. That means I'm hungry. But if an individual has difficulties with interoception, they might not connect the two. And then same for like those bladder and bowel movements, realizing like, oh, my bladder feels full. It means I need to use the bathroom. For individuals that have difficulty with that, they might not be able to relate the two, or they might have muted sensations, which kind of impacts those things. So some activities for this are body scans, which is going through the body one part at a time and thinking about how that feels. So, how does my brain feel? Does it feel like there's a lot going on or not so much? How do my hands feel? Are they relaxed? Are they moving? Same, how do my feet feel? Are they relaxed? Are they moving? And YouTube has some good body scan videos to go through that are a good guide. Same with like mindfulness and breathing exercises. Usually in the mindfulness videos, again, there's a lot on YouTube. They will go through each body part and spend some time there thinking about how you're feeling just to bring more awareness to those areas. Different sensory play can be great for interoception, especially like Kendra was talking about above with the tactile system, thinking about how the different textures make our hands feel. My hands feel wet if I'm playing with shaving cream. My hands feel dry when I'm playing with the pasta bin. My hands feel rough when I'm playing with certain textures. Again, just to really think about what those feelings mean to our body. Body part experiments, which is focusing on a specific part of the body and doing a lot of different activities to kind of evoke a sensation. So for example, maybe if we're doing our skin, we could like tap on our skin 10 times and then talk how it feels. Maybe it feels stinging, maybe it feels normal. We could breathe hot air on our skin and then think about how our skin feels. Yoga, which is kind of similar to the body scans and mindfulness, thinking about how our body feels in the different positions, where are we feeling the pose? And then schedules and visuals, which can help with if we do have muted sensations for like bowel or bladder movements or hunger and thirst, maybe implementing a schedule of when to check in about those things. And visuals for examples of like different ways our body could feel. And that is particularly helpful with like the body part experiments or with the body scans. And then the activity spotlight for this is yoga. So you could use yoga cards or a yoga video, follow along with the cards. And then when you're in each pose, talking about where you're really feeling it, like if you're feeling it in your feet or your legs, if you're feeling tired or awake, how fast your heart is beating, just to kind of promote awareness overall of all the body parts. And bonus, it's great for strengthening and motor planning. So another activity that has multiple benefits. And then sensory strategies for the routines, which I think are particularly important. Sometimes adding some extra things during the day can be challenging with busy schedules. So I think if there are certain activities that work really well for your family and are easy to build into your routine, that will work the best. So in the morning, for kids that take a little bit extra time to wake up, we might want to use a light dimmer to slowly brighten the room. The lotion massage that was talked about earlier, giving some bear hugs or deep pressure squeezes right when we wake up to provide the body with that proprioceptive input that can be really calming. Eating specific breakfast foods. Again, if your kiddo takes longer to wake up in the morning, it might be good to incorporate chewy food or intense flavors to kind of help waken up those muscles and waken up the body. And then animal walking between rooms, another really great way to get in some vestibular movement input and proprioceptive calming input before your child's day. We're going to animal walk to the bathroom. We're going to frog jump to the kitchen table to eat. You're already walking places, so why not turn it into an animal walk to get in some extra input? And then in the evening, again, the lotion massage is a great one. Burrito in a blanket. So having your kid lie down in a blanket and then rolling them up like a burrito is another one that gives us that deep pressure, that calming input. Bear hugs and deep pressure squeezes, and then chewing frozen berries, which can give us some calming input and also some input to our oral senses.
Great. So going off of kind of learning about all of those senses and different activities, but thinking about specific grooming activities and how some of these may be a little bit tricky for kiddos that have a harder time with sensory processing. So with bathing specifically, if your kiddo really seeks out tactile input, doing like a nice scrub with a washcloth or one of those kind of bristly bath brushes. If your kiddo is more sensitive or avoidant, trying a variety of soaps and lotions, allowing your child to go with you to the grocery store and pick out a soap or lotion to try. Same thing with thinking about what do they smell like, and what do they feel like? Are they really smooth? Are they really thick? Do they have little beads in it? All things to consider that I think oftentimes if we don't have that specific sensory sensitivity or preference, we may not think about them. And then we've talked about this so many times, but using lotion after bath time. We love deep pressure around here. For hair brushing, if your child is sensitive, brushing hair while in the shower or bath, especially like after you've just used conditioner or detangler, that can be a really nice alternative to trying to brush dry hair, in the morning after they just woke up. Again, experimenting with different brushes or combs, practicing role playing on a doll or a toy, or allowing the child to practice on you. A lot of times we find that when we give children autonomy over these things, it can change the activity quite a bit. And then also using a timer or social story. So sometimes these activities are difficult for kiddos because they don't have a concept of how long it's going to take or when it's going to be over. So there's some really fun timers on all the app stores that we love to use within sessions that give the kiddo a really good idea of when this activity will be over. And social stories are a great way to utilize specific strategies and read this story to your child so that they know kind of exactly what to expect. And with toothbrushing, it's really fun to use a song that they love, allowing them to choose a song, and then brushing teeth for the duration of that song, if that's something that your child can handle. There's great apps for toothbrushing as well. Brushies is one of them, but you can Google or find them on the App Store. There's tons of great ones, especially depending on your child's interest. Again, allowing the child to pick out the toothbrush or toothpaste, especially if there's a fun character that they love. And oftentimes we recommend a vibrating toothbrush for kiddos who may be seeking out oral input or really interested in even like proprioceptive input. Okay, so some general strategies as we wrap up. Most importantly, if your child's in OT, ask your child's OT about, specific strategies based on your child's sensory needs, and always keeping them updated too, because sometimes sensory preferences and sensory processing looks different across different environments. And so something may look different at home versus at the clinic or at school. And so OTs are really great at that creative problem solving and being able to talk with you as the caregivers about what's number one, realistic for your family, and number two, what works for your child. I mentioned this earlier, offering choices to promote autonomy and independence. We know that kids love to have choices. And so offering them that, especially when, we're working on these sensory skills, these sensory activities that might be really tricky and are, impacting them day to day. And hopefully when we talked about some of these activities, it highlighted that you don't need fancy equipment. Hopefully, these activities can be implemented at home with just things that you already have. We know that, when we're talking about OT sessions and we say that your child loves a swing, we know that we live in Chicago or around Chicago, and swings are not always doable to put inside your house. So, that's another area that your OT would love to talk with you about and just discuss other ways that we can mimic that same input that's regulating for your child in order to help them stay regulated. And some considerations, I think we mentioned a lot of these when we were talking, but not every activity that we mentioned will work for your child, just as not every activity we mentioned would work for us as individuals. Everyone is different. Everyone's sensory system is different. And as I mentioned at the beginning, even within ourselves, each sensory system can be different. So it's all about kind of trying these activities and determining what works best for you. Another important consideration is that a child kind of expressing fear or expressing distress when we, during one of these sensory activities or during a grooming task, things like that, should not be forced to participate. This most often isn't a conscious choice of them showing fear or distress. It's a nervous system reaction that they're having. And so, that's the point of OT, and that's what we really want to focus on during our sessions. I mentioned that different sensory patterns kind of fluctuate depending on the environment, and depending on the child. And then making sure that, as a caregiver, if you are trying one of these sensory strategies at home, that you're being aware of potential signs of dysregulation. So oftentimes we think of moving around a lot, being very active as a sign of dysregulation, or even like crying or being upset. But we see extreme silliness a lot as dysregulation, being maybe unsafe or taking excessive movement risks when typically that child does not do that. And then physical signs of dysregulation like yawning, hiccuping, or changes in skin color as well. And at any sign of dysregulation, we want to stop the activity, and then that would be something to collaborate with your OT about. And then, of course, letting your child's preferences guide you. We always want to be using a child's interests and motivations and strengths, and using those, to work on some of these sensory processing activities.